Okay, right. So where we are now, right? So far we have seen how you can navigate within Salesforce, right? So once you log into your Salesforce, how you can switch between front end and the back end. Okay. So that is something we have already seen. Okay. So now let me recap that once again. Okay. Since there are some new people as well, just I'll show that on a higher level. Okay. So this is Trailhead. We all know this is a free Salesforce learning platform. Okay. So let me log in. I'm logging in. Okay, right. So where can we see our all hands on orgs? Just go to the profile, pick, right? You'll have a drop down and click on hands on orgs. It will take you to all the hands on orgs that you have with your Trailhead account, right? Whatever Trailhead playgrounds or Salesforce developer account, developer edition accounts that you've connected with your Trailhead account, you'll see all of them here. Okay. So now let me launch the Waka one, right? The one that I have created day before yesterday, right? This is the org. Okay. So now I'm currently in front end. Okay. So how I can switch to back end, right? If I just simply click on setup, so I'll go to the back end, right? From back end, if I want to come to the front end, right? So where should I click? Okay, right. So what is an application? So if we bring group of similar, a group of tabs, right? In simple terms, we can call it as group of tabs as well, right? Where you'll bring similar items, right? So in these items, you may have object related tabs, right? Or maybe, any other tabs, right? So reports and dashboards, right? Or what? Or some visual force pages, right? These things we haven't discussed yet, right? Visual force pages and all of that, but you can bring all of these things, right? Which resolves or which helps a particular business process, right? So which are all of similar type, we can bring all of them together and we can make them as an application, right? So this is also something we have seen. Okay. So now if I just simply go back to my Salesforce account, right? So now currently I'm in service account, service application, right? So within the service application, I have home, charter, and all of that. Along with that, so I have accounts, contacts, cases, right? These are the objects, object related tabs. Whereas reports, dashboards, charter, and home are different tabs, right? They are not object related tabs, but they're different tabs. But so we need all of these things, we need all of these things in order to make the service teams, right? Work on their regular day-to-day basis, right? On top of Salesforce. Okay. So that is the reason why all of these things we have grouped together and made it as an application, right? Salesforce has done it. So this is one of the standard applications, right? But we have built our own application, which is recruitment application. Okay. Which is recruitment application. Okay. So what all things we have in recruitment application? Right? We have positions to track all the job openings of our Waka, right? Our Waka company. Okay. And we have candidates, right? So whoever has applied for those particular job positions, we are tracking all of them in the candidate section, right? Whatever applications these candidates have, for whatever jobs, right? For whatever positions these candidates have applied for, right? We are tracking all of those applications as job applications, right? And we do have something called employment websites, wherein we'll track all of our job postings on different websites like naukri.com, right? So and many more other portals. Okay. And the same way, we do have something called reviews. What is the purpose of reviews? Right? So whatever job applications that you have, right? So on those job applications, our teams will start, right? Teams from Waka will start interviewing those people, right, based on the job applications. And then what they'll do, right? They can give reviews within the review section, right? These are all the objects that we have created. So what is an object? Object is nothing but what? A simple table in which we can store all the data. Is that right or wrong, guys? Object is nothing but a simple table in which we can store all the data, right? So for positions, we have created an object, right? And we have created a table. For candidates, we have created table. Job applications, we have created table. Employment websites, we have created table. For reviews also, we have created table. Okay. So columns, we call it as fields, right? Rows, we call it as what? What? Rows, we call it as rows of a table. What do we call it as? Records. Okay. So, and the whole table, we call it as what? Object. Right? So this is the Salesforce terminology. If you take any table, right? So that particular table, database table, right? That particular table, we call it as an object in Salesforce, right? Whatever columns that you have in an object, right? Those columns, we call it as fields. Why? Because they are the data points, right? Through which we are going to capture information for a particular individual or for a particular record, right? So that is what it is. Okay. If you are tracking, if you are inserting data, or maybe if you're tracking some data within that particular table, you'll track it with the help of records, right? Whatever rows that you have, right? All of those rows, we call it as records. Okay, that's fine. So we know this particular thing as well, right? See, the reason why I'm repeating all of these things is because foundation is very important. Okay, so if you have the strong foundation, then you will be able to understand each and everything in more detail. Right, so we have created multiple tabs for all the custom objects that we have created. Okay, so these are all the custom objects, and for all these custom objects, we have created multiple tabs: candidates, employment websites, job applications, positions, reviews, and all of that. Okay, and then we have grouped all of them to create an application. Okay, so now let's go to fields. Okay, so yesterday we have created how many objects? Yesterday we have created almost 5 or 6 objects, right? So now let's create fields into those objects. Okay, so if I go back to my application, if I go to the positions, right? So if I click on new position, what all information it is asking me to enter in order to create a position? It is just simply asking me the title. Okay, but if you look at any job opening, so what all kind of information you'll have in general? Okay, you'll have what is the salary of that particular position, right? So what is the job description of that particular position? What could be the responsibilities of that particular position, right? Roles and responsibilities. The same way, what all skills that are required for that particular position? What are the educational requirements that we have for that particular position, right? So this way you'll have lot of you have to capture a lot of information, right? So it is not just titles, right? With just simple title, we cannot create positions. Okay, so now let's see how we can track all of this information, right? And let's see how you can capture all of that information while creating a position, right? So in order to capture all of that information, what we need to do? We need to create fields on this particular object. Okay, so now what should I do, right? If I have to go to backend, what should I do? What should I do? Click on setup, right? Go to backend, and from here, go to object manager, right? So in which object we want to create these fields? In which object we want to create these fields? Create the below custom fields on the position object, right? This is what our requirement is. Okay, so now what I have to do is I should go to position object. Okay, I should go to position object. I can just simply search for the position in the object manager, and then it will take me to the respective object, right? So once I'm in the object, right, so you'll have, you can see, a lot of items over here, right? Sub menu items over here, like menu items you have, right? Details, right? This is the place where you can see high level information about this particular object, right? The description, the API name, whether it's a custom object or not, right? What is the single label, what is the plural label, whatever details that we have given, right, at the time of creation of this particular object, you can see all of those details here. Okay, and after that, go to fields and relationships, right? These all things we'll see one after the other in more detail, right, in our upcoming classes. Now let's start with fields and relationships, right? So this is the place where you can see all the fields that are there in your org, and if you have to create new fields, right, you can create new fields also from this particular section, right, on this particular object. Okay, so now, right, so we do have some of the fields that are already available. What are these fields? What are these fields? Right, these fields are like title, right? So which is almost position title, right? Which is also called as name, right? For each and every object, right? By default, at the time of creation of the object, we'll create one field. What is that field? That field is name, right? So what is the purpose of this field, right? So using the name, right, we'll identify a particular record, right? You will identify a record, right? I mean, like, so in any given object, right? So how you'll identify its records? You'll identify those records, right? Those particular object related records with the help of name, right? So this is something we have already seen, right? This particular field will come as a standard field. Why? Because by default that is getting created, right? Salesforce is asking us to create at the time of creation of the object, right? So the same way we'll have a owner field, right? So whoever is owning that particular record, right? So that particular information is stored into this, right? The same way last modified by created by fields are also there. So all of these fields are what? Standard fields. Okay. Standard fields. What are standard fields? The fields that were given by Salesforce by default in any object are called as what? Standard fields. Okay. So now, right, if you look at these fields, right, so we don't have these fields, right? So we need job description, we need responsibilities and all of that. Okay. So we don't have all of those fields. So now how can we create all of those fields? Okay. If I have to create a field, so what I have to do is I have to just simply click on new. Once I click on new, okay. So this is, this is also a multi-step process, right? So while creating a field, in the first step, what you have to do is, right, you have to define the type of data that this particular field is going to hold, right? So what type of data that, whatever field that I want to create, right, that particular information will give it in the first step, right? So we do have lot of type of fields, right? We have a field of type auto number, right? So what this particular field will do is this field will automatically, what it will do, this field will automatically generate a random number for us, right? In a random value for us every time you create a record, right, into that particular field. This is what an auto number is all about. Okay. The same way, right, you do have something called formula, lookup relationship and all of that, right? So let's not worry about all of these things. Let me show you a few of the most important fields that we use very often, right? So I've just told you, right? So standard fields are the fields that are already created for you by salesforce.com, such as owner, created by name, last modified by, and all of that, right? So and then what? And then if you go to custom fields are the kind of fields created for our personal use to meet the business requirements, right? So whatever fields that we create in order to meet the business requirements, so those fields we call them as custom fields, right? The one that I've just tried to create is a custom field, right? So now let's look into this. Okay. And right. So this is also something we have seen, right? Standard fields cannot be deleted, right? So now this is something you have to keep in mind, right? Whatever fields that by default Salesforce has given, those fields you cannot delete, right? But there are few other fields also, like system fields. I've already told you those fields you won't be able to see from the UI, but right, directly, but you can see their references wherever you want to see, right? There is a field called ID which will store the unique identifier of a particular record. The day before yesterday, I've already shown you that as well, right? Whenever you open a record, right, in the top, in the URL, right, you'll find some ID, right? You'll find some ID. If I open this particular record, right, the Salesforce developer, if you clearly observe in the URL, right, there is some ID. Okay. Using this, we uniquely identify this particular record, right? So this particular field also we'll have in the backend. Okay. So, but we don't see that field on the UI, right? So there are many other fields also, like created date time and all other stuff. Okay. So, and we don't need to worry about all of those things, right? So the more we go ahead, right, the more we learn about all of these things. Okay. And then next comes to custom fields, right? As I just told you, right? So whenever you create, right, any fields to meet your business requirements, right? So those fields we call them as custom fields, right? So if you take a simple object like student object or something like that, right? Even if you have created that student object, all the fields that I've shown earlier, you'll have those fields like name field, right? Honor field, created by field, and all other stuff, right? So, but along with that, right, so you may want to track phone number, you may want to track email address, you may want to track the address of that particular person and all of that, right? So in that case, what we do, so we create the custom fields based on our requirements, right? The same thing we are doing for the position object as well. Okay. So now let's see, right? So what we have seen, right, at the time of creation of the field, what we have seen, right, we have seen something called data type. What is that particular field type? That is what it is asking, right? So in Salesforce, we do have field lot of type of fields, right? So in those fields, right, so these are the most important field types, like auto number, right? If you're creating an auto number field, what it will do, it will randomly generate a particular number, and it will assign that particular number onto that particular field, right? This is a read-only field. This is a read-only field. That means you cannot enter any data into that field, but Salesforce will automatically randomly generate some value, and it will store that value into that particular field whenever you are creating a new record. Okay. And then we do have something called checkbox. What it will do, right? So it will capture a value either true or false. Okay. I believe you guys know checkbox, right? So you'll have something like this, right? If you tick this, right, it is considered as true. If you are not ticking that, it is considered as false. Okay. So is active or not active, right? So those kind of things we most of the times capture using checkboxes, right? So the same way we do have something called currency field, right? So if you have to insert any currency related data, okay, so then we use currency field. Okay. So we do have number related field as well, right? So but number related field and currency related field are different, right? So whenever you are capturing anything which is related to currency, right, money, right, in those cases you will capture that in currency. But whenever you are capturing something which is related to any numbers, right, in those cases you will capture that particular data using number type of field. The same way we have email type of field, which will store information related to emails, right? If you want to capture emails, then you'll use email field. If you want to capture date or time or something like that, right, so you'll use date time field, right? The same way if you want to capture only date, then we'll use date field, right? The same way if you want to capture some percentages, right, then you in that case you'll use percent field. If you want to capture some location, right, location of a particular individual or something like that, right? So in those cases we use geolocation. Geolocation means what it will take, it will take latitudes and longitudes. Okay. So do you take our earth, right? There are some imaginary lines, right? So using those imaginary lines for each and every position that is there on the earth, right? So there is some latitude and longitude associated with it. Okay. So based on that latitude and longitude, you can identify the location on the earth, right? On the overall earth, right? So Google Maps and every like any maps related technologies, right, will use latitude and longitude to identify a particular location, right? So if you are moving from one location to another location, right, what we generally do, if we don't know the route path, right, we'll use maps, right? So what maps will do, so generally maps store information of a particular location using latitudes and longitudes, right? Latitudes and longitudes. So what it will do is, right, so the moment we give a particular, so for that reason, right, if you have to identify a particular location, what you'll do is, right, so use latitudes and longitudes. The same way, right, if you have to capture any locations, geolocations or something like that, so it will have latitude and longitude, right? So using this particular field, we will capture that. Okay. So if you take this particular example, right, for this particular thing also, you'll have some latitude and longitude, right? If you're going from position A to position B, place A to place B, you may have some kind of different route path. But how Google Maps identifies this is like based on latitudes and longitude, from which latitude and longitude to which latitude and longitude you want to go. It will capture those data points, and from there it will give you a particular route path, right? The same way, if you want to capture the locations, we'll use geolocation. The same way, if you want to capture phone numbers or something like that, you can use phone field. If you want to capture text related data, then you'll use text field. If you want to capture, long text, right? So something like this, a small piece of text, if you want to capture, then we will use text field. But if you want to capture like sentences or maybe paragraphs or something like that, so in those cases, what do we do? What do we use? We use text area field, right? This is a big sentence, right? So this particular thing also can be fit into text field. But if you have 10 lines of like this, right? So then you'll go to text area, right? In the same way, you have something called URL. If you want to capture data related to websites or some website URLs or something like that, So in those cases, you'll use URL. The same way we do have something called time. If you have to capture time values, right, we'll use time and all of that. Okay, right. So let me go back. Let me go back to our choose the, choose the field type window, right? So now if you see here, right, these are the fields, right? So you have something called text area long, which will store, so little extra more text, right? The same way there is something called text area rich, right? Text area rich is different from text area long, right? So text area long is like, it will just simply give you a text box. That's it, wherein you have to fill all the information. Okay. Whereas text area rich will give you all the formatting options, right? If you open your Word file, then what all you'll see, right? So along with a text area, like along with the canvas, right, where you write all of your content, you'll see some items in the top, right? Like how you can make a particular text as bold, right? How you can create list items, right? Maybe how you can create some items in a numbered order or something like that. You can format all of those things from your Word document, right? So in Microsoft Word, right, from the menu items, right? The same way, so in rich text area, right, so there also you'll have a text box, but you'll have these formatting options available whenever you create a rich text field. Okay, so that is what it is, right? The same way, time we have seen, URL we have seen, right? There is something called text encrypted, right? So you don't need to worry about this particular thing, right? The more we go ahead, the more we can learn about all of these things. Okay, so the same way we have something called formula, lookup relationship, right? Master detail relationship, external lookup relationship. So these things, comes into advanced field types, right? So we'll see those things in our tomorrow and day after tomorrow's classes. Okay, so in our case, right, if you look at this particular thing, job description, so what type of field do you think we should use for it? Job description.
Text area.
Text area, right? So most of the times we use text area to capture the job description. You'll have 10 or 15 lines of information, right, in any of the job descriptions that we see on Naukri or any of the websites, job portals, right? So LinkedIn or whatever it could be, and then click on next, right? So I've selected text area and then click on next, right? In the second step, you'll give all your details. What is the label of the field and what is the field name, right? What is this name? Field name means, right? What is this label and what is this field name? Can someone tell me? We have already seen this in objects also. What is the difference between both of them? Can someone tell me? Label is the name through which, right, we can label is the name through which we can identify that particular field or object or whatever it could be on the UI. But whereas the label is something that is for backend, right? Is it right or wrong? That is for backend, right? So this particular thing is API name. If you ask me, it is for API name. It is for the UI part. Okay. So now what is the label, field label here? Job description is the field label. Okay. So, and then API name, we can just simply leave it like this, right? So like you can just simply come here so that it will automatically generate an API name on its own. Okay. So in the API names, right? So you will not have any kind of spaces or something like that. You can have underscores, but you'll never have spaces, right? So we have given job description as well. I've told you, right? So it is always good to have best practice, right? So to have description onto any of the metadata that you're creating in your Salesforce. Okay. So in our case, right? So for this particular job description, let's give some description. Okay. What is the description? This is the description. Okay. And if you want to give some help text and all of that, that also you can do. What is an help text, right? So at any, like give on any field, right, you will see something called like this I button. Okay. So if you want to give some information about that particular field to your end users, right, to make them know about like what is the purpose of that particular field and all of that. So in that case, we will use this help text. Okay, right? So now let me just simply click on next. Okay, so and then so we have step 3. Okay, so what is this step 3? What is this step 3? Right, while creating tabs, we have seen something, right? So where we have defined like, who all should have access, which all profiles, right? Which all profiles should have access to that particular what? Particular tab, right? So based on that only, those people, right, people who are having the profiles can see that particular tab, right? The same way for everything, right? For everything that you create, right? So you can define whether that can be seen by someone from the UI or not. You can define that. Okay. So the same thing goes for fields also. Okay. While creating a field, you can define, right, which all profiles, right, for which all users under which all profiles can see this particular field, right? So can see or can edit whatever things, right? So you can decide that from this particular step, right? So we have all these profiles in our Salesforce. These are all the standard profiles, right? Do you want to make this visible for all the profiles, or do you want to make it visible for only certain profiles, right? That is something you'll define here. Or you want to make it only read only for all the profiles, right? Read only means they can only see that particular field, but they cannot edit anything in that particular field, right? The same way, if you are making it visible, right, they can modify that field also. Okay. So that is the one this is all about. So for now, I'm just simply making it visible for all the profiles. Or else if I don't want to make it visible for all the profiles, and if I want to make it visible only for us, then what should I do? Can some, right? System administrator is a profile, right? So we can just simply enable it for system administrator. But for now, what I'll do is I'll just simply enable it for all the profiles, so that everyone in my Salesforce org can see that particular field, given that they have access to that particular object. Okay. So now then click on next, and then last step, which is called layout, right? So on which page layouts this particular field should be available. So you may ask me like, what is page layout issue? Okay. So page layouts is something we haven't discussed yet. Okay. So as I told you, right, for everything that you create in Salesforce, there should be some kind of UI element that you need to create. Okay. So for objects, what is it? For objects, what is it? Tabs, right? So if you create tabs, then only you'll be able to see that in the UI. The same way, right, whenever you are creating those fields, right, you have to make those fields available onto its associated objects page layout, right? For every object, you can create page layouts. Page layout is in the sense, right, how those fields should be visible on the UI, right? So how the record should be visible, not the fields, how the record should be visible on the UI, that you will define with the help of page layouts. Okay. So these things we'll discuss in more detail, but for now, just remember like that. Okay. Just simply, remember it, like, what is the purpose of it. Okay. So now let me just show you. Okay. Let me just show you. So if I come here, this is the page layout of the position object, right? Whatever I am seeing here, right? This position title and all of that, the look and feel, right? How the fields are organized and everything, right? This is generally we call it as a layout, right? So while creating a field, right, you have to include that field into any of the page layouts that you have in your org. Then only that field will be visible on the UI. Otherwise, you will not be able to see that field on the front end. Okay. So that is what it is, right? So the same way, if I click on new, right? So this is also the page layout, right? This is also the page layout. It's the same page layout. The one that I'm just seeing there, it's the same page layout, but created date and all other fields are not being displayed here. Why? Because they are system fields, right? By the time we create, the data in those fields gets automatically generated. So for that reason, those fields were not visible here, right? But while capturing the data, position is something that we have to capture, right? So for that reason, we have position title here. Okay. So now whatever fields that you include, right, onto the page layout, you'll see only those fields here. Okay. So along with this position title and owner, what are the other fields that we have on this? What are the other fields that we have on this? What are the other fields? Right, created by and last modified by also there. But since these are system fields, we are not capturing this data from the user. So this is something that is automatically getting generated. So for that reason, we are not able to see that, right, while clicking on new, right? So even though both of them are the same page layout. Okay. Is that right? So now, there is a page layout named position. Okay. There is a page layout named position that is already created for us by default by the system, right? So on that page layout, so do you want to include this field or not? Okay. In the fourth step, that is what you will define. Okay. So I want to include this field onto that particular page layout as well. That is the reason why I have marked this as checked. Okay. So if you don't do this, you'll have that field, right? You'll still have that field on the object, but that won't be visible on the UI. Okay, through UI, you cannot capture that information. Okay, that is what it is. So in step one, what you have done? In step one, what we have done? You have defined the type of data, right? Data type, if you ask me. Okay. In step two, what you have defined? What you have defined? Field label, right? And field name, right? So these are the things we have taken, right? And in step three, what we have done?
Field level security.
Right? Field level security. For what all profiles, right? So that particular field should be visible. That is what we have defined in the third step, right? So in the fourth step,
Page layout.
Page layout, right? On which page layout we want to use that particular field. So that is something we are defining here. Okay. Right. Now what I'll do is, right, so I can just simply click on save so that that field gets created here, right? See, job description is available here. If I come here and if I refresh this, okay, and if I click on new now, I can see that particular field also available. See, job description field is also available here. Okay, let me add some more information, right? Salesforce administrator is a role, say for example. Okay, so what is the job description, right? So let me check for some job description in Google. Salesforce admin job description, something, right? I'm just simply taking some job description from a random website. Okay, something like this. Okay, so I'm just simply capturing this and I'm adding it here. Okay, so now let me click on save. What is it? Too large, it is saying. Why it is too large? Text area only, right? By default, the text area length will be 255. But if you want to increase that particular length, you can increase that particular length also. Okay, so where is it? So this is here, it is, right? Job description, right? So and let me click on edit. Okay, right. So we don't have an option to change that. Okay, so now what I'll do is, right, so let me just simply delete this particular thing and let me just simply keep this and let me save this. Okay, so now I have the job description as well, right? So you can have up to 255 characters in the what text area, right? So for that reason, it didn't took a lot of information here. But if we want to have so some more data to be captured, right? So some huge text to be captured or something like that. So then which type of field we can use? We can use text area long. There is something that I've already shown you, right? So in the field types, in those field types, I can select text area long so that I can capture some more data. Okay, so now let's go to the next field, which is responsibilities. Okay, so in responsibilities, which type of field I can use here? Text area long, right? So this also will generally capture some, and this field also should generally have some some more information, right? So this also generally captures some large amount of data, if you ask me. Okay, so now let me create that. So what should I do now in step one? Which field I should select? Please come on, be active, guys. Come on, which field I should select? Responsibilities is the field I want to create now. Roles and responsibilities, right? So on any given job description, right? So you'll for any job, you'll find JD, and along with that, you'll find roles and responsibilities as well. Which field I should select now, guys? Text area long. Okay, let's select text area long, right? So that it can capture up to 1,31,072 characters, whereas text area can capture only up to 250 to 255 characters. Okay, right. So now let's click on next. And then what? What is the label of the field? What is the label of the field? Responsibilities is the label of the field. Okay, right. So if you want to increase, by default, this length will come as 32,768. But if you want to increase, you can increase, right? So there is something called visible lines. What is this visible lines? Okay, so if you look at this particular thing, so say for example, consider this also like a field. If it is on the front end, right? If it is on the UI, and if this is a field, right? So how many number of lines it can take, right, by default, while entering the data, right? So so that particular thing is called this number of visible lines. Okay, you can enter this much of data, but you'll find only the you'll be able to see only these many lines. But if you want to increase the size of it, you can just simply drag and drop this. Sorry, not drag and drop, right? You can drag this. Otherwise, you can just simply leave it like that. Okay, so that is what this visible lines is all about. Okay, so if I want to see, if I'm typing something here, right? So how many visible lines I have here? 3 visible lines. 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Say for example, if I enlarge this, right? So how many more lines I can add? I can add. So I can add one more line. So how many number of visible lines now here on this? How many visible lines are there now? 4, right? This is what the number of visible lines is all about. Okay. So how many visible lines you want to have for that particular field, right? Input field. That is what this is, right? If I want to have 4, I can just have 4. If I want to have 3, I can just simply have 3. But that doesn't mean, right? Since I have 3 lines, that doesn't mean that I can only take data up to 3 lines. It is not like that, right? So it can go to any number of lines, right? Right? See how many lines are there, but you will have a small cursor with which you can navigate up and down, right? So that is what it is, right? So now we know the number of visible lines, right? So we can just simply keep the visible lines as 3. Okay, now in the description, so what is the description for this, right? So let's add some description for it, right? To capture roles and responsibilities of a position. Okay, that is what it is. Okay, so and then you can just simply leave all other things as it is for now and click on next. And what's next, right? Should this be visible for all the profiles? Yes, let's make it visible for all the profiles and click on next. Right, should this be visible on this particular page layout? Yes, click on save. Right, so now we have this particular field also available on the UI. Okay, so now let me come back and let me refresh this. Now I should be able to see that particular field also available here. Okay, see, this responsibilities field is also available here. So from the record detail page also I can add if I want to add, right? See, we have only 3 lines, right? Right, so if I want to add more lines, I can add as well, right? 3 or 2, whatever it could be, right? So at the time of creation, how many lines we have kept? Did we kept 2 or 3? 3, right? Okay, let's remove this. Let me click on cancel. Let me come back, and if you let me click on new, right? See how many lines are there? 1, 2, 3. So because of my display, I was not able. I can only see only 2 lines. But generally you'll see this much. Okay, you can store up to 3 lines. Okay, so now let's go back to the same one of the existing fields, that existing records that we have, Salesforce administrator, right? So in the responsibilities, what I want to do, right? So now let me add this particular responsibilities that we have from this job. Okay, let me add this and save. Okay, so now I have responsibilities also got captured. Okay, now let's capture some other more fields, right? Skills required, educational requirements, minimum pay, right? The skills required and educational requirements, you guys can create it or on your own, or let me create it. Okay, so what is it? Skills required, right? That is also text area. Okay, that is also text area long. What is the purpose of skills required? To capture what all skills that are required for this particular position. Okay, next. Right, so you have few buttons like previous, save, and new, and save. If you click on previous, it will take you to the previous step, right? If you click on save, it will save this particular field. But if you click on save and new, what it will do is it will save that field in the backend, but again it will open the same field creation wizard for us, right? field creation wizard for us. No, so since I want to create multiple fields one after the other, so I don't want to save this and again click on that new button and again create it and again save it, again click on new button and all of that. What I'll do is I'll just simply click on save and new, so that this field gets saved in the backend, and again it will open the field creation wizard for me so that I can create next new fields. Okay, so now let me click on save and new. That field got automatically saved in the backend. Again, I can create a new field from here, right? So what is it? Educational requirement. This is also text area long, right? So text area long. Next, educational requirements, right? So visible lines, I'm just simply leaving it like that. Click on next, make it visible, click on next, save and okay. So and then next goes to min pay. What is this min pay? This particular field is to capture minimum pay and what is the minimum pay for this particular position, right? So if you take any of the jobs, right, in any of the companies, they'll have a salary band, right? What should be the minimum pay and what should be the maximum pay for that particular job, right? So that information also we can capture, right? How can we capture? We can capture it with the help of min pay and max pay fields. Okay, so min pay field. So what should be the type of data that we should be capturing into min pay? Salary is what? Currency, right?
Currency.
Yeah, so for that reason, we should select currency. Right, where is the currency? Where is it? Where is it? Here is it. Okay, here it is. Let me click on next. Let me click on next. Min pay. I'm just simply leaving it like this, right? So in currencies, we'll have decimal places as well. Is it right or wrong? Sometimes you'll have, 100 rupees 50 paisa or 150 rupees 24 paisa, something like that, right? So it doesn't know it, right? We are creating it for our job to capture, salary information and all of that. So for that reason, it'll always, ask you to give the decimal places as well, right? So how many decimal places we want to have? We want to have only 0 decimal places. Why? Because we are not going to, capture this currency value in decimals. Okay, we'll capture only on this. We'll capture the data only on regular basis, right? So what should be the maximum length of that particular field, right? So how many characters, right? How many characters of currency value that you want to capture, right? And if you say like, you want to capture the values between 0 to 1000, say for example, and then what will happen? The maximum length will become 3, right? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. What is the length of this? 4, right? So if you want to capture a maximum of up to 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs, say for example, right? This is how much? This is 10 lakhs, right? This is 10 lakhs, right? So how many characters were there in it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters were there. Okay, so that means I can have up to maximum of 7, something like that. Okay, so what I'll do is, right, for now I just simply leave this to 18. Why? Because so our company didn't give, Waka didn't give us any specific details about it, like what should be the length of that particular currency value and all of that. They didn't specify it for us, so that so we can just simply leave it as it is for now. Okay, so into the description, right, you can add some description to keep a track of position, salary range and all of that, right? And then next. Okay, let's make this visible for all the profiles. Next. And let's make this visible on all the page layouts, right? Next, save and new. Okay, what's next? Max pay. Okay, what should be the max pay? Okay, currency. Okay, next.
Max pay.
Okay, and then next, make it visible. Next, and save and new. Okay, so and then, right, so there is something that we have here, right? So this particular field is mentioned as required, but we haven't done it, but we'll do that. Okay, so and then what is the next thing, right? Does this position requires any travel? Does this position, so whoever is joining into this position, do they need to travel between different locations, right? Do they need to travel to the client's location, or do they need to travel between our offices, between multiple locations and all of that, right? So that is when, okay, what we can use is, right, we can use checkbox, right? So what should I do now, right? Whether this particular position requires travel or not, how can I identify that, right? With a checkbox I can capture that information, right? So where is the checkbox? Where is the checkbox? Where is the checkbox? Right, here is it. Okay, here it is. Okay, now let me go here, right? Travel required, right? So what is the default value? Should this be checked by default, or should this be unchecked by default? Right, by default, don't check this, right? Just simply keep that particular thing as not checked, right? So like a general checkbox, but don't tick it or something like that, right? So for that reason, I am just simply marking it as unchecked. Okay, so now what is it? Click on next, and then make this visible for all the profiles, and then click on next, and then save. Okay, now let's go to next. Now let's go to the next field. Okay, so technical skills needed. Okay, so but before that, right, let's look at this open date and close date and all of that, right? I'll tell you what these type of fields are, right? So there are some type of fields which we call it as pick list fields as well. I'll tell you what these pick list fields are. Okay, but before that, let's look at the open date and close date. What is the purpose of the open date? Right, to capture, like, when that particular position is open, right? To track when the position is closed, right? So we can capture that from the close date. To track, like, so by when this position should be closed, right? By when, so we'll capture that in higher by. Okay, so open date is
Yes,
like
sir.
when it got open. Closed date, it means when it got closed. Higher by means by what date this position should be closed. Okay, so say for example, I have opened a position today and I want this position to be closed by end of this month. Okay, then we can consider, like, higher by is the deadline, right? End of this month. But the close date is, like, when that particular position got actually closed, right? So that is what this close date is all about. Say for example, tomorrow only this position got closed. Okay, and in that case, what will happen? In open date, we'll have today's date. In close date, we'll have tomorrow's date. But in the higher by date, we'll have a date. We'll have a date for the next what? I mean, like, so by the end of this month. Okay, so that is what it is, right? But if you clearly observe, there is something called required here. Okay, what is the purpose of it, right? If you enable this particular checkbox, then what will happen is, right, so whenever you create any record on the UI, right, so then that particular field you should definitely fill, otherwise you cannot create that particular record, right? So if you want to make any field as mandatory, okay, then in those cases, what you can do is you can make that particular field as required, right? If you mark this checkbox to true, then you should definitely input some value into it, otherwise you cannot create that particular record, whatever record that you want to create, right? If you clearly observe, this particular position title is by default a required field. Okay, so the name field is by default a required field. So for that reason, right, you are seeing a small red asterisk here. Okay, but see, if I go to the next fields, right, without filling this field, what it is showing, like, please complete this field and all of that, right? So that means this is how you can make a particular field as required. If you enable this, so it will be a required field. Okay, so let's not make that required. So let me click on next. Let me make it visible. Next, and save any. Okay, let me create one more field. Close date, right?
Date.
And then
Close date.
close date, and then next, visible, next, and save and new. Okay, now let's create one more field called higher by. Higher by. Where is it? Date. Where is the date? Where is the date? Here is the date. Next, higher by. Next, Make this visible. Next. And save. Okay, goes to pick list field. What is the purpose of the pick list field? Okay, so pick list fields are drop down fields created to keep the data integrity intact. Okay, so most of the times, so when you are filling any forms, you'll see fields like country. Okay, wherein some values will be given, right? In a drop down where you have to select some value from that particular drop down, and that value will be captured from that particular field. Okay, and you might have seen something like state as well, right? Where you'll just simply you'll have lot of values in the drop down, and you'll select something, and that value will be captured into that particular form. Okay, right? So that is what this particular pick list field is, right? It is a drop down field where from all of the drop down values you can select any one of the drop down value. Okay, so but what is this data integrity intact, and why did we call this data integrity intact here? Okay, the reason why, because right, there are times, right, there will be times. Okay, see, any value you can just simply any particular value, if you want to capture, right, any field value, you can capture that from the text field. There is no problem in it, right? So but what if you are giving that as a text field for your end users, and if they are, say for example, you have something called country. Okay, say for example, you have something called country. Okay, you have given it as a text field. Okay, so you are asking your end users to fill the not I mean, like, you are asking your end users to fill the country name also whenever they are creating some student information, say for example. Okay, some student information. End users means what? Right, so our sales team or whatever it could be. Okay, so they're filling the candidate's details, right? The student or whatever it could be, right? While filling their details, name and all of that, so there comes a country as well, right? So in country also they have to fill some value. Say for example, you have given it as a text field. So then what will happen? Anyone can fill any value into that, right? So in that case, someone will fill it like this, India. Someone will fill it like India, something like this. So then what happens, right? So while filling that particular value, maybe that guy's intention is to fill India. But what has been done, right? What happened here, right? He has inputted some wrong data into it. Okay. So whenever what could be the outcome, right? So what kind of data that you are going to store in that particular field, right? If you have some fixed values, right? Only within those fixed range of values, right? So if you have to input data into it, in that case, what you can do is, right, you can just simply put all of those values as a drop down, right? And you can make your sales teams or your internal users or whatever it could be to select a value from those predefined values that are there in it. Okay, so in those cases we'll use pick list fields. Okay, so in order to make the data integrity intact, that means, so you are now, say for example, now you have a pick list, right, with a country, and you have already set up some predefined values like India, US, right? So UK, right? Pakistan and something like this. Okay, so now what happens, right? So users has to select any one of these values from from this particular field, right? Whatever values that you have given, predefined values, from those values only they have to select one value. So now what happens, right? So now there is a minimum error or a minimum chance, to make some kind of data integrity issues, right? Some kind of, so the minimum chance that people are entering wrong data into it. Is that right or wrong? Okay, right. So we have two types of pick list fields. One is regular pick list field and the other one is multi-select pick list field. So in regular pick list field, right, what will happen is, right, you'll have a drop down, and from all of that drop down you can select only one value from it. You can select only one value from it. Okay, whereas multi-select pick list, right, so you can select multiple values. It is not just one value, right? Even if you have some 10 or 20 values in the drop down, right, so you can select more than one. So that is what we call it as multi-select. Okay, so now let's create a pick list field and see how you can do that. Okay, so how can I create a pick list field? So that is nothing much different, right? So you'll just simply go here, new, click on new, right? There is something called technical skills needed. Okay, this is the field. Okay, so what you can do is, right, I can just simply come here, and I can select pick list and I can click on next, right? And then what are the pick list values that I have, right? Technical skills needed. In that I have JavaScript, C, and Apex. These are the technical skills that are needed for us. Okay, so in that case, what I can do is, right, field, what is the field label? First, I have to select the field label. Technical skills needed. Technical skills needed. Okay, so here you have two options. One is use global value, use global pick list value set, and the other one is enter values with each value separated by new line. Okay, so I'll tell you what this global pick list value set is, but for now, just simply select the second option. Okay, so select the second option. Okay, and then it will ask you to enter all the values that you want to have into it. Okay, in our case, right, we have three values: JavaScript, C, and Apex. Okay, how to do that? You can just simply enter it here, right? Each value separated by new line. That is what they've said, right? So what I'll do is I'll just simply remove this, click enter, right? Remove this comma and click enter. Now I'll have three values into it. Okay. What is the description of the field? To indicate which programming languages are required for this particular position. Okay, that is what my description is. Is this required? Yes, this is required. If you want to make it required, you can just simply mark it required. Otherwise, you can just simply leave it like this. Okay, so now let's click on next. Okay, let's make it visible. Click on next and click on save. Okay, now that field is also got created. Right now, if I go to Salesforce administrator position, right, and if I refresh this, I can see all the fields that we have created. See, min pay, right? Max pay, right? So in skills required, what all skills required, right? Some tech skills are needed, something like this. Okay, skills required. Okay, and educational requirements, BTech, say for example, minimum pay is 15,000. Sorry, not 15,000, right? So 4,50,000, something like this. Okay, max pay 9 lakhs or something like this. Okay, so here we are getting dollar, right? But we can change that to rupees and all of that, so that those things we'll see in the later classes, right? In the set, from the setup and all. So how to change that and all of this, right? So we will see that. So for now, you can just simply leave it. Right, on the travel required, what is the open date? Right, open date is 16th, right? What should be the close? So what close date is something that will enter only once the position is closed, right? So for that reason, I'm just simply leaving it like that. So hire by 30th of this month. Okay, so what kind of technical skills needed? So they would need Apex, right? So I can just simply save this. Okay, so that is how it is, right? Even if I go to positions and if I click on new, right? So there also I can see all of these fields that I've just created. Okay, what if, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, but see, generally, people may have, right? So multiple skills, and so they may need to, so we may need to select multiple skills also. So in that case, a single drop down or this one is not enough for us, right? So in that case, a single pick list, right? A regular pick list is not enough for us, right? So say for example, if we want to, if this particular position needs both JavaScript and C, okay, as a technical skills required. So in that case, what you have to do, right? We have to make sure that how we can create it as what? How can we create it? Right? We can create it as multi-select pick list, right? So multi-select pick list, right? So where you can select multiple values, right? Instead of one value. Right now, let's try to create that, right? What I'll do is I'll just simply delete this field, whatever field that I've created just now, this technical skills required, right? How can I delete a field? How can I delete a field? I can just simply go back, right? So I can, on this particular technical skills required, I can click here and I can delete this, right? Either I can delete it or I can change one field to another type of field as well. Okay, so I'll show you that also, right? First, what I'll do is I'll delete this, right? So now that field is deleted, right? So now let me recreate it once again. Okay. So now what field I should select? Can someone tell me which field I should select?
English
Multi-select. Multi-select. Okay. So click next. Tech skills required, right? Enter values with each value separated by a new line, right? So what all values that I have? What all values that I have? JavaScript, C, Apex, okay, LWC, HTML, okay, CSS, something like this. I'm writing all of this shit. Okay, now let me click on next. Right, make this visible for everyone. Click on next, right, and click on save. Now if I refresh this, let's see what will happen. See, tech skills required. If I select this, what happened, right? No value is there here. So the reason why, because, right? So while creating this, we haven't selected, I mean, like this particular, oh, one second. Let me come back. Let me click on new. Right? See, this is how I can see it, right? So if I want to select multiple values, what I can do is I can just simply click on control on my keyboard and I can select what all values that I want to have, right? So then I can just simply click on this arrow icon so that these values can be considered as like, selected values. Or if you want to select individually, you can do that as well, right? So these are all the technical skills that are required for a particular position. Say, for example, that is what it is. Then just simply click on save. Then that's it, right? So that is how you'll capture multiple values, right? From a multi-select pick list. So now let's look at the limitations that we have, right? So in a single pick list, right? So field, you can have only up to 1,000 values. How many values? You can have only up to 1,000 values, right? Like C, JavaScript, right? Apex, HTML, CSS. How many values that we have entered here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values we have entered here, right? This way you can have up to 1,000 values in any of the pick list fields that you create. Okay. So if you are creating multi-select pick list values, you can have only up to 500 values. Okay. Into that pick list. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. Okay. So now let's go to dependent pick list. Okay. So, but before going that, right, let me show you something called global pick list value set, right? So when I tried, right, when I tried creating a pick list field, I have seen something called global pick list value set. What is this global pick list value set? Okay, let me tell you. Okay, so there will be times, right? You have to repetitively enter the same set of data into the pick list value. Say, for example, if you take country, okay, so countries, right? How many countries you'll have if you are creating a country field? How many countries you may generally have, right? You may generally have up to 300 countries. Is that right or wrong? Right? I don't have the right number, right? But consider like, we have 300 countries, right? This particular data is same across any object, right? And if you are creating this particular country field on position object, say, for example, in that case, so the values within that country field should be the same, right? So irrespective of the object, say, for example, you are creating the same kind of field, right, on candidate object, say, for example, right? So, or maybe you are creating that on another standard object that is already there in Salesforce, which is account object, right? And on account object, you want to create a country field, say, for example, right? So irrespective of the type of object, there are chances that, the values that you are going to store into that particular field could be same. Is that right or wrong? Is that right or wrong, guys? So if you have to enter all of those 300 values manually each and every time that you are creating this particular field on different objects, it will take a lot of time, right? For that particular reason, what Salesforce has done is Salesforce has came up with something called global pick list value set. Okay. So if you feel like, yeah, if you feel like, there are some values that can be reused across your org, right? So based on the type of field or based on the type of data that you want to capture, what you can do is you can create that as a global value pick list set. And once you have it, you can just simply select that global value pick list set whenever you are creating pick list fields. Okay, if the values that you want to store into that pick list is somewhat similar, somewhat not somewhat, right? Is it something that you want to have from the existing predefined value sets, right? So in that case, you can select those values from the global pick list value set. Okay, so if I select this, right, if I select this, I can see if I have any global pick list values, right? So but I don't have any global pick list value set so far. Okay, so let me create one global value pick list set. Search for pick list, right? Pick list value sets. Okay, this is what it is. Pick list value sets. If you come here, right, this is where you'll create. Okay, from the setup in the quick find box, search for pick list value sets. From here, you can create anything, right? Country is one of the example that I've just told you. Okay, say for example, country is the one that I want to capture, right? So what I can do, country values. So there is something called Google Bard. Okay, so Google has introduced their new AI product named Google Bard. Okay, so what it is, I mean, like, so this is also a conversational bard, sorry, bot, which is somewhat similar to ChatGPT. Okay, so you can use that. You can use that to ask anything, right? So I'm going to use that bard now. Hey Bard, can you share the countries list separated in new lines? Okay, let's see. Huh? List of countries. I am a text-based AI and can't assist with that. Okay, let me check with ChatGPT. Right, they have recently made it available. Right, it is still in learning process. It is, sometimes it is not even answering the basic questions. But the more people start using it, the more intelligent it will become. So let's hope. Okay, so it'll give whatever answers that are needed for us going forward. So let me log into ChatGPT for now. Right, so these are the conversational chatbots, right? So they are, you can consider them like real humans with higher intelligence, right? So you can not higher intelligence, let's not call it like that. Okay, but generally, like, you can have conversations with them and you can ask them questions, right? So since these bots are already loaded with lot of data sets, right? They have lot of information. They can just simply share whatever questions that we ask them. Okay, right. So now let me ask the same question. Can you share the list of countries in new separated lines? Okay, let's not worry about all of that. Let's take few countries here, right? Let me copy them and let me come back here and let me just simply enter all of this information. Okay, so I'm not adding all the countries, right? Since I believe you guys will be able to understand it, right? So now let me just simply save this. Right now I have a value set. So what I can do is, right, whenever I create any field, on any of the objects, right? Whether it's account or activity or whatever it could be, standard object, custom object, or whatever it is. Whenever, see, I just went to account object, right? So say, for example, if I come here and if I want to create a new field named country or something like that, okay? So in that case, what is the country, right? So we know it should be a type of pick list, right? So I can just simply come here and I can select that particular thing, right? And I can give the name as country. And from the global pick list value set, right, I can select the country here. So that what will happen, whatever values that we have in that pick list value set that we have created just now, so those values will come into this particular field, right? For the end users to select. Okay, is that clear, guys? Or do you have any questions? Is that clear?
Clear enough.
Okay, so you can reuse pick list values using global pick list value sets whenever you feel like there is something that can be that is similar, right? Those values are similar across multiple objects, right? You don't need to recreate all of those values every time that you create a particular pick list. You can create a global pick list value set and you can use that value set wherever you want to use whenever you are creating a particular field. Okay, so that is how it will work. Okay, now let's look at the field dependencies. Okay, so what are these field dependencies? Okay, so say for example, you have two fields. Okay, you have two fields, field 1 and field 2. Okay, what do you want to do is, right, based on the selection of value in the field 1, what do you want to do is, right, you want to display different values in field 2. Okay, in those cases, right, so we'll create field dependencies. Okay, say for example, let's take a simple example, right? Country and state. Okay, based on the selection of country value, what should we generally do? We should only display the state values related to that particular country, right? In countries, say for example, you have 40 countries, right? So in out of those 40 countries, if you are selecting India, right? So and then what the state field should display? The state field should display only what? Only values, right? Only states which are related to India. Okay, like 30 states or something like that. Okay, so in that case, we create field dependencies. Okay, in that case, what do? We create field dependency. Now let's see that. Okay, so this is one of the example, right? So country and USA, right? So in country, India and USA, these are the two values that you have, right? Whereas in city, right? Whereas in city, say for example, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 values, say for example, you have, right? So if I select India, then what I want to do is, right, even though there are 4 values, I want to display only Delhi and Hyderabad, say for example. Okay, so in that case, what we have to do is we have to create dependency between these two fields, right? The same way, if I select USA, what should I have, right? I should have only New York and New Jersey to be available for the selection, right? In the city values, right? So if you have these kind of requirements in those cases, what can we do? We can create field dependencies. Okay, now let's do that. Right now, let me go back to the object manager, right? Now let me come back. Okay, so I don't have direct field dependencies on this particular object. Right now, let me look at some other objects if I have any field dependency. Right. Okay, so yeah, we do have. Yeah, okay, so let's create some pick list fields, right? Let's create a pick list field called status on the position object. Okay, now let's come back, right? So let's go to object manager and then select position object. Okay, what is the purpose of the status, right? So we want to capture whether that position is in the new state, or is it in the pending for approval, or is it already approved by the department head and it went out for live, or is it closed, or it is not yet approved but somehow got closed, or is it that position got opened but somehow after few days the department has decided to not continue that particular position or something like that. In that case, so we'll just simply capture it as closed, cancelled, or something like that. Okay, so this is what it is, right? So now let's use these values to create a status field. Okay, so how can you do that? Can someone guide me, guys? How can I create that field? Rajnikant, tell me, how can I do that? Okay, let me select pick list. Okay, I'm just simply creating pick list where, so I'm not even selecting I'm not even creating, the field dependency. I'm just simply creating some pick list fields here. That's it. Okay, let me create status, right? Okay, enter the values. Okay, click next. Next. Save and new. Okay, let's look at this. Okay, location is something, right? Not even location. Now let's take these two values. Okay, so one is functional area and the other one is job level. Okay, one is the functional area and the other one is job level. Now let's see how we can create what the dependency between both of them, right? Functional area is like, what is the purpose of this field? Purpose of this field is to capture, right? Which department is that, right? So from which department that position is, I mean, we are creating that position. For which department we are creating that position. So if we want to capture that, so what we can generally do is, right, we can capture that with the help of functional area. Okay, now let's create that first. Okay, so what is that, right? It is a pick list field. Okay, so what can I do now? Let me click on next. Okay, functional area is the name of the field, right? What are the values that I have, right? These are the values that I have. Okay, let me add all of those values, right, in separated new lines. There should be no comma. Okay, these are the values, okay, that I have. Okay, now let me make it visible for all the profiles and let me click on next and let me click on save. Okay, so and then I do have some other field called job level, right? So in every department there will be some levels, right? Job levels, right? So entry level positions you'll have, if you take IT department, right? In IT department you'll have level 1 jobs, right? Level 2 jobs, level 3 jobs and all of that. Okay, so those kind of jobs, right? So those are the levels, right? Let's consider it like this, right? For finance you have FN100, FN200, FN300, FN400, right? For HR, say for example, right, for human resources, so we do have HR100, HR200, HR300, HR400, right? So the same way for information technology, we have some levels like IT100, IT200, IT300, IT400, right? So that way for each and every department and the functional area, we have different job levels. Okay, so now let's add all of those job levels first. Okay, so how can you do that? New
pick list.
pick list, good, and then next job level, right? And let me capture all of these values. Okay, okay, how many things I should do it like this? Okay, let me do it for IT and then I'll just simply leave it. Okay, so after IT, I'll not do it for others. Why? Because it is killing a lot of time. But I believe you guys are able to understand this, what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'll remove all the other things. Let me just simply keep it like that. Okay, right. So now let me click on next and then make it visible for everyone and then click on next and then save. Okay, now if I come back, right, if I come back to my positions that I've created, if I click on new, if I come down, right, so I'm not able to see that. Why? Right, that field is already created and I've made it visible for all the profiles, but sometimes what happens, right, so we won't be able to see them the very next moment that we create them, right? So this is something that we should always keep in mind. So whenever you are creating anything for UI, right, so what we have created that field, but that field needs to come and visible on the UI, right? So for that reason, anything that needs to be reflected on UI, it will take some time. Okay, it will take some time. But if you don't want to wait for that long, so there is a there is an alternative to it, right? I'll tell you what needs to be done. Okay, but generally, why we don't see the fields the very next moment that we create, or the very next moment that we add it on the page, add it onto the page layout? Okay, there is a reason for that. So the reason is cache. Okay, the reason is cache memory. You load any application into your browser, right? Whether it's any web application, right? So whether it's Facebook, right, or Salesforce, or whatever it could be, right? So what happens is, right, whenever you load that application, so that application gets loaded, right? So that application will load all of its UI elements first into your browser. Okay, and it will store those UI elements. Okay, what it will do, it will store those UI elements, right? So the reason why, because every time you refresh a particular page, or every time you create a new record, if those UI elements need to be re-rendered, right, each and every time that you refresh or something like that, what will happen, right? Your browser will take a lot of time to process the data. Okay, so for that reason, what these browsers will do is, right, so they will store all of these UI elements into the browser cache memory, browser's cache memory. Okay, browser's cache memory. Why? Because so most of the times, whatever that is there on the UI, that won't get changed, right? So that won't get changed on very frequent basis. Okay, for that reason, what generally we do is, right, so all of the files, right, all of the front end related files, right? So we do have some HTML, CSS, and all other things. You don't need to worry about all of these things. What is HTML, what is CSS, and all of that. But generally, so keep it, remember, just try to understand it like that. Okay, so for UI, whatever components or whatever files that are there in order to display this particular user interface, all the files will get stored into the cache memory of your browser. Okay, the moment any page is loaded. Okay, so since the changes on the UI are not frequent, right? So most of the applications follow this particular architecture, right? Whereas the cache is stored so that, so whenever you refresh a particular page, right, it will use the captured elements, right? It will use the elements from your cache memory, and it will display that particular data based on the elements that are there in your cache memory. Okay, so but here it is not like that, right? So we are changing the UI very frequently now. Why? Because we are adding one field after the other, right, each and every minute, right? So that means this particular these particular fields that are there on the UI needs to be changed for us, right? Otherwise we won't be able to see the changes in real time. So for that, what we need to do, we need to delete that particular cache memory. What we have to do, we have to delete that particular cache memory, so that whenever we refresh this particular page, right, it will re-render the all the elements that are there in it, right? It will again pull all the elements from the Salesforce server, and it will display all the UI elements. Okay, so now again, if I open this, I'm not able to see that field, right? Those new fields that I've created. What are those new fields? What are those new fields? Functional area and the job level. Okay, so for that, what I'll do is, right, so in order to clear the cache memory of any application, right, whether it's Salesforce or any other application, what you have to do is you have to click on your you have to do the right click on your mouse and click on inspect, right? Go to application. Okay, in this application, right, you will see something called, right, in storage, right, you will have something called storage, right? If you go to that storage, you will find something called clear site data. Okay, if I click on this, what will happen is, right, it will clear all the cache that got stored into my browser. Okay, now if I refresh this, see what will happen. So whatever fields that I've just created, so those fields will start reflecting onto my UI. See, functional area, status, job level, right? All these fields got started appearing here. Okay, so now let's look into this. Okay, say for example, so I want to select, see, a functional area as finance, right? So at that point in time, so what I want to do, right, so for the job level, right, I don't want all the IT related jobs, right, all the HR related jobs that are coming, job levels that are coming in. I want only finance related job levels, right? How can I do that? I've already told you. How can we do that? Right, whenever we select a particular value, based on that value, if we want to display only certain values from any other field, so what should we do? Right, we should create a dependency. Okay, we should create a field dependency. Okay, this is something I've already told you. right? Now let's see how you can create that particular field dependency between, these two fields. Okay, so now what is my requirement? My requirement is that whenever I select finance, I want only finance related jobs showing up. So whenever I select HR, I want only HR related job levels, that needs to be shown up, right? So let me show you how can you do that. Okay, so what I will do is, right, so what we need to do is, let's go to the object manager, right? To the same fields and relationships, right, onto the same object, right? Here you will see something called field dependencies, right? Along with the new field, you'll see something called field dependencies. If you click on this, from here, you can create dependencies between the fields that are there in your object. Okay, so now let me click on new, right? So see, in field dependencies, we will have two things that you need to understand, right? So what we are doing, right, whenever you are selecting job function, what we are doing, we are deciding, right, we are deciding which values needs to be displayed in the job level. Okay, so that means here this job function, you can consider it like, controlling field, and this job level, you can consider it like dependent field. Okay, so what is dependent and what is controlling, right? The field with which, we want to control, what values that we want to see in the other field, right? That particular field, we call it as controlling field. Okay, the field, right, which is dependent on the other field, right, on the other field's values, so that particular field, we call it as dependent field. Okay, in our case, what is dependent field and what is controlling field? Which one is the dependent and which one is the controlling field in the functional area and job level? Guys, please tell me. If you guys able to understand it, please tell me.
Functional area is the controlling field.
Functional area is the controlling field. And what should be the dependent field?
Job level. Job level.
Job level is a dependent field. That is what you'll select here. And then you'll click on continue. Once you click on continue, you'll see some interface where you can select, like, what all values that you want to have for, a particular value on the functional area. Okay, on the that particular controlling field, right? So how many values we have? Finance, human resource, and all of that. So you'll see all of them in columns, right? And all the job levels, you'll see them in the rows. Okay, so now let's see, right? So in finance, what all values you want to have? What all values you want to have? You can just simply select those values. FN, right? I don't want all of this. So you have to click on control on your keyboard and then select whatever values that you want to have. Okay, FN 100, FN 200, FN 300, and FN 400. I want it for finance. Okay, for human resources, which values I want? HR 100, HR 200, HR 300, HR 400. For IT, I want to have IT 100, IT 200, IT 300, IT 400. Okay, so these are the values that I have. For retail and warehousing, I'm just simply leaving that. Okay, so here you can decide whether you want to include these values, right? So whenever I select finance, do I want to make these values available, or do I want to remove these values and display other values, right? That is what, this include values and exclude values. If I click on include values, then what will happen? Whenever select finance, right, only these values will be displayed, right? So whenever I select HR, only these values will be displayed. Whenever I select IT, only these values will be displayed. Okay, so say for example, right, so what I'll do is, right, I'll just simply select these things, right, the same way as I told you earlier. And if I click on exclude values, then what will happen? Those values will be excluded out of it and all the values will be displayed. Okay, so now, these are the ones I want to include, right, as I just told you. So for that reason, what I'll do is I'll just select only those values. Let me include for HR. Let me select this. For information technology, let me select this. Okay, include values. Okay, now save this. What it is saying, 3 controlling field values have no dependent values included, right? So this retail operations, warehousing, and there is one more thing also, that is what it is saying, but that is fine. So I don't bother about it. Let me click on OK and save it. Now see what happens, right? Now see what happens. Let me refresh this. So now if I select functional area as IT, let's see what happens. See, now I can see only IT options coming up. Okay. So the same way, if I select finance, see, now I can see only finance related options coming up. Okay. Now if I select information technology, information technology I've already selected. Right? Now if I select HR, right, see, only I'm able to see HR related what values in the drop down. Between what type of fields you can create field dependency. Okay. So you can create field dependency on 3 type of fields, right? So one is pick list to pick list. Pick list is something we have already seen, right? Pick list values, check boxes, and the other one is multi-select. Okay. Other one is multi-select. Okay. You can create dependency between pick list to pick list. That is something we have already seen. Okay. So whereas you can create dependency between pick list to multi-select pick list. Okay. The same way you can create dependency between checkbox to pick list. Right. So the same way you can create, pick list between checkbox and multi-select also. Okay. So see, if you clearly observe this, right? If you clearly observe this, checkbox can be only on the controlling side. Okay. The same way, if you clearly observe this, multi-select can be only on the dependent side. Is that clear or not? Multi-select can never be on the controlling side, and checkbox can never be on the what? Dependent side. So you can create dependency between what? As I told you, right? You can create dependency between checkbox and any other type of fields as well. Okay. So if you come here, see functional area, you can see job level, you can see, right? Status you can see, and travel required is also something coming up. Why travel required is coming up? Why travel required is coming up? So travel required is a checkbox. Okay. So whenever, right? So whenever you want a particular field to be available, right? A particular fields values to be available, when a particular checkbox is checked or something like that. So in those cases, what do? We go with checkbox as a controlling field, and we'll make, something available in the dependency. Okay. So say for example, right, that functional area and track and that the travel required, I've clicked on creating dependency. But if you clearly observe, so when it is unchecked, what all values you want to show, when it is checked, what all values you want to show, right? Only this particular thing you'll have, nothing more, right? If you're creating dependency between checkbox and any other fields, only when it is unchecked, what all values you want to display, when it is checked, what all values you want to display. Okay. That is what it is, right? So I don't have a proper example for this. Generally, whenever you want to display, right, say for example, you have some drop down, right? Some particular pick list field available. Okay. You have some particular pick list field available. So you want to make your users to select an option from that pick list field only when a particular checkbox is checked. Okay. Only when a particular checkbox is checked, then only you want your users to, make your users to, select a value from this particular pick list, right? In those cases, what you do is, right, so you'll go with dependency between this checkbox and pick list. Okay. Is that so? Now, but if I see here, I try to create this dependencies, right? So that it will become easy for you to understand how this works and all of that, right? So but this is how it is. Okay. So can anyone give me an example, like, so where can we have this dependency between checkbox and a pick list? Can anyone do that? Does anyone have an example for it? I'm not able to think of it, right? If anyone have an example.
Traveling and not traveling cases.
Okay. Okay, maybe, right? Okay, so say for example, this is, let's look at this one, right? We have something called travel required, right? Travel required checkbox is there. Okay, travel required checkbox is there. Whenever this particular checkbox is checked, right, then only we should allow our users to select a particular pick list, right? So what all places can be traveled? Something like this is there. What all places can be traveled, right? Something like this. Okay, so then what can you do, right? Say for example, this is a multi-select pick list. Okay, multi-select pick list. So when this particular checkbox is checked, then only you should allow people to select values from this particular what? field. So in that case, what you can do is, right, you can create dependency between these two fields. Whereas, for unchecked, don't display any values. For checked, display all the values. Okay, that is what you can do. So then what will happen? So only once this particular field is checked, then only you'll be able to select values from the other field, right? This is one of the use cases that we have, right? This way you can create dependencies between checkboxes and the pick list and multi-select pick list jobs. Is that clear, guys? Is that clear? Is that clear? If it is clear, just type clear in the comment box, right? I cannot say the same thing again and again every day, guys. So please follow these things. Okay, right, good. Okay, right. So this is what it is. Checkbox can be controlling field, whereas multi-select pick list cannot be a controlling field. Okay, so these are the two things that you should keep in your mind. Okay.